Nestled in the rolling hills of a small, quiet town, Jack Thompson lived a peaceful life on his sprawling ranch. The land stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with tall oak trees, patches of wildflowers, and lush green pastures where his cattle grazed lazily under the sun. It was a place he had built from scratch over decades, every fence post hammered into the ground, every beam of his wooden house carefully chosen and placed by his own hands. To Jack, this wasn't just property. It was his sanctuary, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. The ranch wasn't just picturesque, it was also self-sufficient. At its heart stood a sturdy well system that supplied fresh water to both his home and the animals that called the ranch their home. This setup gave Jack a sense of independence. He didn't rely on city utilities or anyone else for something as essential as water. Everything about his life here was simple, predictable, and satisfying. For years, nothing disturbed the tranquility of his days. That is, until recently. Not too long ago, things started changing in Jack's otherwise peaceful neighborhood. A new homeowners association HOA board took charge, led by none other than Karen Miller, a woman whose reputation preceded her. Karen was known throughout the community as someone who took the rules very seriously. Some might even say she had an obsession with them. Whether it was enforcing strict lawn mowing schedules or policing mailbox colors, Karen made sure everyone followed the HOA guidelines to the letter, or at least how she interpreted them. And if you dared step out of line, well, let's just say Karen wasn't shy about making her displeasure known. At first, Jack tried to stay out of Karen's way. He figured that as long as he kept to himself and maintained his ranch properly, there wouldn't be any issues. But Karen seemed determined to make waves. One day, she sent him a strongly worded letter demanding that he remove the solar panels he'd installed on his roof. According to Karen, these panels violated some obscure clause in the HOA handbook about aesthetic consistency. Jack read the letter, shook his head, and promptly threw it in the trash. Solar panels saved him money and helped the environment. Why would he take them down? Besides, this was his land. Who was Karen to tell him what he could or couldn't do? Tensions simmered beneath the surface after that, but nothing came of it, for a while at least. Then one sunny afternoon, Jack decided it was time to tackle a minor issue, a leaking pipe connected to his well. Fixing it meant shutting off the main water supply temporarily, which wasn't uncommon for ranch owners like him. It was a routine task, one he'd done dozens of times before without incident. Little did he know, this seemingly ordinary chore would set off a chain reaction that turned his quiet life upside down. On that particular morning, Jack woke up early, grabbed his toolbox, and headed outside to get to work. He turned off the water main near the well, rolled up his sleeves, and got down to business. Dirt caked his boots as he dug around the base of the pipe, sweat trickling down his forehead despite the cool breeze. It was dirty, messy work, but Jack didn't mind. He enjoyed fixing things himself. It reminded him of why he loved living on the ranch in the first place. Unbeknownst to Jack, however, trouble was brewing nearby. Karen happened to be visiting a neighbor 2 properties down when she noticed something odd. Her faucet ran dry. No water flowed from the tap, no matter how much she twisted the handle. Panic set in immediately. Was there a problem with the water supply? Had someone tampered with it? Her mind raced with possibilities, each more dramatic than the last. Without wasting a moment, Karen marched toward Jack's ranch, her heels clicking sharply against the gravel path. By the time she arrived, she was fuming. She found Jack knee-deep in mud, tools scattered around him as he worked diligently on the pipe. Without so much as a polite greeting, Karen launched into an accusatory tirade. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice shrill and piercing. "Why is there no water anywhere? Did you cut it off?" Jack paused mid-task, wiping his hands on his jeans before turning to face her. He blinked once, then twice, taken aback by her tone. "Karen," he said evenly, "this is my well. I'm fixing a leaky pipe, that's all." But Karen wasn't having it. Her face flushed red as she crossed her arms over her chest. "Your well? Are you sure about that?" Because I don't have water either, and neither does anyone else around here. Jack sighed, already sensing this conversation was going nowhere. Good. Look, he explained patiently, my well is completely separate from whatever system you're using. I shut off my own water, not yours, not the neighborhood's, just mine. Karen scoffed loudly, clearly unconvinced. That's impossible. How can your well be independent? You're lying, Jack. You need to turn it back on right now. Her voice grew louder with each word, drawing the attention of a few curious neighbors who peeked out from their windows. Jack clenched his jaw but forced himself to remain calm. Arguing with Karen was pointless. He knew that from experience. Instead, he gestured to the equipment around him. If you don't believe me, feel free to look at the setup yourself. Or better yet, call a plumber. They'll confirm what I'm saying. But Karen refused to listen. Humiliated and frustrated, she spun on her heel and stormed back to her car, muttering under her breath about teaching Jack a lesson. Jack watched her go, shaking his head in disbelief. What had started as a mundane repair job was quickly spiraling into something far more complicated and infuriating. As Jack returned to his work, unaware of what was coming next, Karen sped away from the ranch, her mind racing with indignation. She felt certain that Jack was hiding something, that he was deliberately causing trouble for the entire neighborhood. Determined to prove her point, she reached for her phone and dialed 911. In her mind, this wasn't just a dispute over water. It was an emergency, one that required immediate intervention. And thus began a series of events that would leave the entire community talking for weeks to come. Karen's decision to call 911 marked a turning point in what had started as a minor disagreement. Her car screeched to a halt in her driveway, and she stormed inside, still fuming from her encounter with Jack. Pacing back and forth in her living room, she clutched her phone tightly, replaying the scene at the ranch in her mind. To Karen, it wasn't just about the water. It was about control. She prided herself on maintaining order in the neighborhood, ensuring everyone followed the rules she believed were crucial for harmony. And now Jack's actions, whether intentional or not, felt like a direct challenge to her authority. With fire, determination burning in her eyes, Karen dialed 911. The operator answered calmly, asking for details about the emergency. Karen launched into an impassioned explanation, her voice rising with every word. "There's no water anywhere," she exclaimed. "This man, Jack Thompson, he shut off the entire subdivision's water supply. He's tampering with it, and I think he needs to be arrested." The operator hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. "Ma'am," they said cautiously, "are you certain this is a matter for law enforcement? If it's a utility issue, you might want to contact your local water provider." But Karen wouldn't hear any of it. No, she interrupted, her tone sharp and insistent. "It's not the city's water, it's coming from his property. He's doing this deliberately to cause problems. You need to send someone, right away." Reluctantly, the operator assured her that deputies would be dispatched to investigate. Hanging up, Karen leaned back against her couch, feeling a mix of satisfaction and vindication. In her mind, justice was finally being served. Little did she know, her impulsive decision would soon spiral out of control. Meanwhile, Jack remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in his direction. Back at the ranch, he continued working on the pipe, methodically tightening connections and checking for leaks. The sun beat down on him as he labored, sweat soaking through his shirt, but he didn't mind. Hard work was second nature to him, and fixing things gave him a sense of accomplishment. As far as he was concerned, Karen's accusations were nothing more than empty threats. He trusted that anyone reasonable would see the truth once they looked at the facts. About an hour later, the distant wail of sirens broke the peaceful silence of the countryside. At first, Jack assumed the noise was unrelated, a medical emergency or perhaps a traffic stop along the nearby highway. But as the sound grew louder and closer, his curiosity turned to confusion. Moments later, 2 sheriff's vehicles pulled up to his gate, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Jack straightened up, brushing dirt off his hands as he walked toward the entrance. His heart sank when he saw the deputies step out of their cars. Something about the situation felt off. Why were law enforcement officers showing up at his ranch? What could possibly warrant such a response? "Afternoon, sir," one of the deputies greeted him, his expression unreadable. "We received a call about a possible disturbance involving your water system. Mind telling us what's going on?" Jack blinked, momentarily speechless. A disturbance? His water system? The absurdity of the claim hit him like a punch to the gut. Taking a deep breath, he forced himself to stay calm. "Deputies," he began, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not sure who called you, but there's been some kind of misunderstanding. This is my private well. I shut off the water temporarily because I'm repairing a leaky pipe, that's all." As Jack spoke, Karen appeared at the edge of the property, arms crossed and lips pursed in a smug grin. She lingered just close enough to eavesdrop, but far enough to avoid direct confrontation. Her presence didn't go unnoticed by either Jack or the deputies, who exchanged a quick glance before turning their attention back to him. "Sir," the second deputy interjected, "we're not accusing you of anything. We're just here to get to the bottom of this. Can you show us where the water source is located?" "Of course," Jack replied, gesturing for them to follow him. He led the deputies to the well, explaining its setup as they inspected it. Pointing to the pipes and valves, he reiterated that the system was entirely self-contained, supplying water solely to his home and livestock. There was no connection to any communal infrastructure, nothing that could affect his neighbors. The deputies nodded thoughtfully, jotting down notes as they listened. One of them even crouched down to examine the equipment more closely. After a few minutes, they seemed satisfied that Jack was telling the truth. Turning to face him, the first deputy spoke again. "Mr. Thompson, based on what we've seen so far, it looks like this is your personal property. If the water comes from your well, then shutting it off doesn't violate any laws." Relief washed over Jack, but before he could respond, Karen stepped forward, unable to contain herself any longer. "That's ridiculous," she blurted out, her voice shrill and accusatory. "He's lying. He's trying to sabotage the neighborhood." "Arrest him!" The deputies exchanged another glance, this time tinged with exasperation. The first deputy addressed Karen directly, his tone firm but polite. "Ma'am, unless you have evidence to support your claims, we can't take action here. Based on what we've observed, Mr. Thompson is within his rights to manage his own property." Karen's face reddened, her indignation reaching new heights. "What do you mean within his rights? He's breaking HOA rules. Doesn't that count for anything?" The second deputy shook his head gently. "HOA disputes are civil matters, not criminal ones. They don't fall under our jurisdiction. If you feel strongly about this, you might want to address it through the proper channels, like the HOA. "Board," Karen sputtered, struggling to find a rebuttal. For a moment, she stood frozen, staring at the deputies as if daring them to change their minds. When it became clear they weren't budging, she threw up her hands in frustration. "Fine," she snapped. "But mark my words, this isn't over. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person he is." With that, she spun around and marched back to her car, slamming the door behind her. Jack watched her leave, shaking his head in disbelief. The entire situation felt surreal, like something out of a bad sitcom. Here he was, minding his own business, and suddenly he was embroiled in a drama that made no sense whatsoever. Once Karen was gone, the deputies wrapped up their investigation. They thanked Jack for his cooperation and reiterated that everything appeared to be above board. As they prepared to leave, one of them offered a parting piece of advice. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "you might want to document everything related to your water system, permits, inspections, that sort of thing, just in case this comes up again." Jack nodded gratefully. "I appreciate that, Deputy. Thanks for understanding." As the patrol cars drove away, Jack let out a long sigh. The immediate crisis had passed, but he knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to let things go quietly. If anything, her public humiliation at the hands of law enforcement would only fuel her determination to come after him. Still, he refused to let her antics dictate how he lived his life. This was his ranch, his land, and his well. No amount of drama could change that. Standing amidst the tools and mud, Jack took a moment to collect his thoughts. The day had taken an unexpected turn, but he reminded himself of something important. Sometimes standing your ground meant weathering storms, even those created by people like Karen. With renewed resolve, he returned to his work, knowing that finishing the repair was the best way to move forward. The confrontation at the ranch didn't end when Karen stormed off in a huff. If anything, it only marked the beginning of a much larger ordeal. Word of the incident spread like wildfire through the neighborhood, fueled by whispers over backyard fences and hurried phone calls between neighbors. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, nearly everyone in the community had heard some version of what happened, though few knew the full truth. Some believed Karen's dramatic claims that Jack had cut off the water supply to the entire subdivision, while others sided with Jack, convinced he was simply minding his own business. The divide grew wider with each passing hour. Karen, humiliated by her failed attempt to involve law enforcement, wasn't about to let the matter drop. She saw herself as the protector of the neighborhood, someone who kept things running smoothly and ensured everyone followed the rules. In her mind, Jack's refusal to bend to her demands wasn't just inconvenient, it was an affront to everything she stood for. That night, unable to sleep, she sat at her kitchen table drafting a formal complaint against him to present to the HOA board. Her handwriting was sharp and deliberate, filled with accusations that painted Jack as reckless and defiant. She even included a detailed timeline of events, though it leaned heavily on speculation and hearsay. By morning, Karen had rallied a small group of like-minded neighbors to support her cause. Together, they planned their strategy for the upcoming HOA meeting. Determined to make Jack pay for embarrassing her, they rehearsed their arguments, gathering documents they thought would back up Karen's claims. One neighbor claimed Jack's solar panels were lowering property values, despite no evidence to support this, while another insisted his well might contaminate groundwater, a theory based entirely on fear rather than fact. Armed with these half-baked ideas, Karen felt confident she could sway the board to take action against Jack. When the day of the HOA meeting arrived, tension crackled in the air. The community center where the meetings were held buzzed with chatter, as residents filed in, eager to see how the drama would unfold. Jack entered quietly wearing his usual work clothes, faded jeans, a plaid shirt, and scuffed boots caked with dirt from the ranch. He carried a folder stuffed with documents proving the independence of his well system, along with geological surveys showing exactly where his property lines and water sources ended. To Jack, this was simple logic. Facts spoke louder than baseless accusations. But he knew better than to underestimate Karen's ability to twist reality to suit her narrative. As the meeting began, the HOA president called for order, though it was clear emotions were running high. Karen wasted no time stepping forward, her voice trembling with indignation as she launched into her prepared speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," she declared, pacing dramatically in front of the room, "we have a serious issue on our hands. Jack Thompson has repeatedly shown disregard for our community's standards. First, he installed those unsightly solar panels without approval. Now he's tampering with our water supply, leaving us all vulnerable. We can't allow this kind of behavior to continue." Her words elicited murmurs of agreement from some corners of the room, but others exchanged skeptical glances. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to believe Karen's version of events. When it was Jack's turn to speak, he approached the podium calmly, setting his folder down before addressing the crowd. "I understand there's been a lot of confusion," he began, his tone measured and respectful. "But I want to clarify something important. My well is completely independent. It doesn't connect to any shared infrastructure, and it never, as shutting off my water affects no one but me." He opened the folder and passed around copies of the geological survey, pointing out key details that proved his point. "This document shows the boundaries of my property and confirms the location of my well. There's no overlap with anyone else's land or water systems. I've lived here for years and my setup has always been self-sufficient. This isn't about breaking rules, it's about taking care of my own property." The room fell silent. As people examined the papers, many nodding slowly as they absorbed the information. Even some of Karen's supporters seemed uncertain now, their confidence wavering in the face of hard evidence. Still, Karen refused to back down. She interrupted Jack mid-sentence, her voice shrill and desperate. "That's not enough," she exclaimed. "How do we know these documents are legitimate? For all we know, he forged them." Jack clenched his jaw but maintained his composure. "If you doubt the authenticity of these records," he replied evenly, "you're welcome to verify them yourself, or hire an independent expert to inspect my well. I have nothing to hide." At this point, the HOA president stepped in, sensing the discussion was spiraling out of control. "Let's stay focused," she said firmly. "We're here to address concerns, not make unfounded accusations. Mr. Thompson has provided documentation supporting his claims. Unless someone can offer concrete evidence to the contrary, I suggest we move on." Karen bristled at being shut down, but she wasn't finished. Yet. As the meeting drew to a close, she made one last plea to the board, urging them to impose penalties on Jack for violating HOA guidelines. However, her argument lacked substance, relying more on emotion than fact. When the board reconvened privately to deliberate, it didn't take long for them to reach a decision. Moments later, the president returned to announce the verdict. Jack had done nothing wrong, and Karen's complaint was dismissed. The room erupted into quiet murmurs as the news sank in. Some applauded Jack silently, grateful for his level-headedness throughout the ordeal. Others avoided eye contact with Karen, embarrassed by her theatrics. For her part, Karen looked utterly defeated, her face pale and her shoulders slumped. She muttered something under her breath about appealing the decision, but no one paid much attention. The meeting adjourned shortly afterward, leaving Jack free to return to his ranch, and leaving Karen to pick up the pieces of her shattered reputation. In the days that followed, the fallout from the incident rippled through the community. Social media lit up with posts mocking Karen's overreaction, earning her the nickname HOA Karen. Memes featuring her angry expression circulated widely, turning her into an unwitting internet sensation. Locally, opinions about her leadership style shifted drastically. Many neighbors who once tolerated her strict enforcement of HOA rules now questioned whether her approach was necessary or even healthy for the community. For Jack, life slowly returned to normal, but not without lasting changes. The ordeal had taught him that standing up for himself sometimes meant enduring unnecessary drama, yet it also brought unexpected benefits. Neighbors who had previously kept their distance began reaching out, offering help with projects or simply stopping by for friendly conversations. Some even admitted they admired his patience and integrity during the conflict. Jack found himself smiling more often, appreciating the newfound camaraderie despite the chaos that preceded it. Still, the experience left him wary. He knew Karen wouldn't give up easily. Her pride wouldn't allow it. But Jack had learned something valuable. Living on his own terms required resilience, especially when faced with people intent on controlling others. As he stood on his porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, he felt a deep sense of peace. His ranch remained untouched by the storm, just as he'd always hoped it would. And though challenges might arise again in the future, Jack knew he was ready to face them head-on, with grit, determination, and unwavering faith in doing what was right. The aftermath of the HOA meeting rippled through the community like a stone dropped into a still pond. What had started as a private dispute between Jack and Karen quickly became public fodder, sparking conversations at grocery stores, coffee shops, and even school pickup lines. For some, it was a source of entertainment, a real-life drama unfolding right in their backyard. For others, it served as a wake-up call about the kind of leadership they wanted in their neighborhood. Karen, once revered or feared for her strict adherence to HOA rules, found herself on shaky ground. The internet memes mocking her antics spread far beyond the local community, reaching social media platforms where strangers weighed in with scathing comments. "Classic Karen," one post read, accompanied by a picture of her glaring indignantly during the meeting. Another meme superimposed her face onto a cartoon character yelling nonsense, captioned, "When you try to arrest someone for fixing their own pipe." While some neighbors chuckled at the humor, others felt sympathy for Karen, knowing she must have been embarrassed. But whether people laughed or cringed, one thing was certain. Karen's reputation had taken a hit. For Karen, the days following the HOA meeting were unbearable. She avoided eye contact with neighbors, dreading the whispers and sideways glances whenever she ventured outside. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications from online forums and news articles covering the incident. Every mention stung, a reminder that her overreaction had not only failed but also made her the butt of countless jokes. At first, she tried to defend herself, posting lengthy explanations on social media about why she believed Jack posed a threat to the community. But instead of garnering support, her posts drew more ridicule, prompting her to delete them within hours. Meanwhile, Jack became an unlikely hero. People admired his calm demeanor and willingness to stand up to Karen's bullying. Some neighbors, who had previously dismissed him as a quiet loner, now saw him in a different light. They admired his self-reliance, his ability to live off the grid with solar panels and a private well, and respected how he handled the situation with grace under pressure. One neighbor even left a basket of homemade cookies on his porch with a note that read, "Thanks for being the voice of reason." Despite the newfound admiration, Jack didn't let the attention go to his head. He preferred his peaceful life away from the spotlight and hoped the drama would fade soon. However, he couldn't ignore the subtle shift in the neighborhood dynamic. Neighbors who rarely spoke to him before began stopping by unannounced, often bringing small gifts or offering assistance with chores around the ranch. A young couple down the road asked for advice on installing their own solar panels, while another neighbor volunteered to help mend a section of his fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. These gestures, though small, warmed Jack's heart. It seemed the ordeal had brought out a sense of unity among those who valued fairness and common sense. As weeks passed, Karen's influence within the HOA began to wane. Several board members privately expressed concerns about her leadership style, questioning whether her rigid enforcement of trivial rules was truly beneficial for the community. During a follow-up meeting, one member suggested revisiting the association's guidelines to prioritize practicality over aesthetics. Another proposed creating a committee to mediate disputes, rather than allowing individuals like Karen to escalate conflicts unnecessarily. Though Karen fought back fiercely, arguing that loosening restrictions would lead to chaos, her arguments carried little weight after the embarrassing outcome of her battle with Jack. Eventually, Karen realized she was fighting a losing war. Attendance at HOA meetings dwindled, with many residents opting to skip gatherings they viewed as a waste of time. Even her closest allies grew quieter, unwilling to publicly align themselves with her increasingly unpopular stance. Frustrated and humiliated, Karen submitted her resignation as HOA president in a terse email to the board. In it, she claimed she was stepping down to focus on personal matters, though everyone knew the truth. Her reign of micromanagement had come to an end. With Karen no longer at the helm, the HOA underwent a transformation. The new leadership team consisted of individuals committed to fostering goodwill and cooperation rather than enforcing arbitrary regulations. They scrapped outdated policies such as the ban on brightly colored mailboxes and introduced initiatives aimed at building stronger connections among neighbors. Community events like potluck dinners and volunteer cleanup days replaced contentious debates over property compliance. Slowly but surely, the atmosphere shifted from tension to camaraderie. For Jack, the change was palpable. Gone were the passive-aggressive letters and unsolicited inspections of his property. Instead, he received friendly waves from passing cars and invitations to neighborhood gatherings. He attended a few of these events, enjoying the opportunity to share stories about life on the ranch and learn more about his neighbors' lives. Over time, he discovered that many of them shared similar frustrations with Karen's leadership and appreciated his role in challenging it. Yet, despite the positive changes, Jack remained cautious. He understood that tensions could resurface, especially if someone else stepped into Karen's shoes with the same authoritarian mindset. To protect himself and potentially others, he decided to formalize his documentation further. He hired a surveyor to create an updated map of his property, clearly marking the boundaries of his land and the location of his well. He also reached out to a lawyer specializing in property rights, ensuring he had legal protection should anyone attempt to challenge him again. These steps gave him peace of mind, knowing he was prepared for whatever the future might hold. As the months rolled by, Karen retreated deeper into obscurity. She spent most of her time indoors, avoiding interactions with neighbors and focusing on projects around her home. Occasionally, Jack would catch glimpses of her tending to her garden or walking her dog, but she never acknowledged him. Whether she harbored lingering resentment or simply chose to move on, he couldn't say. Either way, he felt no animosity toward her. Life was too short to dwell on grudges, and Jack preferred to channel his energy into things that mattered, like maintaining his ranch and nurturing the relationships he'd built with his neighbors. Looking back on the ordeal, Jack couldn't help but marvel at how something so trivial, a leaking pipe and a brief water outage, had spiraled into such a spectacle. At times it felt surreal, like a chapter from a novel rather than real life. Yet he recognized the lessons it taught him: the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity, the value of clear communication, and the power of community when people came together for the right reasons. Though he wished the incident had never happened, he couldn't deny the silver linings it brought: the friendships forged, the unnecessary rules dismantled, and the renewed appreciation for the freedom his ranch provided. One crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves danced in the breeze, Jack sat on his porch sipping a cup of coffee. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across his fields. He watched as deer grazed near the edge of the woods, their movements unhurried and graceful. For a moment, everything felt perfect, quiet, serene, and untouched by conflict. Jack smiled softly, savoring the simplicity of the moment. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he knew he had the strength to face them. After all, this was his sanctuary, a place where he belonged, and nothing, not even HOA Karen, could take that away. The months that followed Karen's resignation brought a noticeable shift in the neighborhood. The once tense atmosphere gave way to a sense of calm and cooperation, as if the community had collectively exhaled after holding its breath for too long. The HOA meetings, which used to feel like battlegrounds, transformed into collaborative discussions where neighbors shared ideas openly and worked toward solutions everyone could agree on. New leadership meant fewer rules focused on trivial matters and more emphasis on fostering goodwill among residents. It wasn't perfect, no community ever is, but it was a vast improvement from the rigid control Karen had enforced. Jack noticed these changes in small ways. For instance, when he decided to repaint his barn door bright red, no one batted an eye. In fact, a few neighbors complimented the bold color, saying it added character to the area. This simple act of acceptance reminded Jack how stifling things had been under Karen's watch. Now people seemed more concerned with supporting each other than policing minor details. One neighbor even joked, "If you can survive, Karen, you deserve to paint your barn whatever color you want." Jack laughed along, grateful for the lighter mood that now permeated the community. But beyond surface-level improvements, the incident had deeper implications for Jack personally. He realized just how much he valued his independence, not just in terms of living off-grid, but also in standing up for what he believed was right. The standoff with Karen tested his patience and resolve, but it also reinforced his belief in self-reliance. Every time he fixed a fence post or tended to his livestock, he felt a renewed appreciation for the life he'd built on the ranch. It wasn't always easy, but it was his, and no amount of drama could take that away. That said, the experience left Jack wiser. He understood that peace sometimes required compromise, or at least better communication. After the ordeal, he made a conscious effort to keep lines open with his neighbors. If he planned to shut off his water again for maintenance, he sent out a courtesy text to those nearby, explaining the situation ahead of time. Though his well didn't affect their water supply, Jack knew misunderstandings could arise without clear explanations. By taking this proactive step, he hoped to prevent future conflicts and maintain the harmony that had finally settled over the neighborhood. As winter approached, the community came together in ways it never had before. The new HOA board organized a holiday potluck at the community center, inviting everyone to share food, stories, and laughter. Jack hesitated at first. Large gatherings weren't really his thing, but several neighbors encouraged him to attend, promising it would be fun. Eventually, he agreed, bringing a batch of homemade chili and setting up a folding chair near the fireplace. To his surprise, he found himself enjoying the evening. Conversations flowed easily, and for the first time in years, Jack felt truly connected to the people around him. Karen, meanwhile, remained largely absent from community events. She attended the potluck briefly, lingering awkwardly by the dessert table before slipping out unnoticed. Some speculated she was still embarrassed about the fallout from her feud with Jack, while others thought she simply preferred solitude. Whatever the reason, most neighbors accepted her absence without complaint, choosing to focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on the past. Jack, for his part, harbored no ill will toward her. He figured everyone made mistakes, and perhaps Karen had learned something valuable from the experience too, even if it was painful. By spring, the neighborhood had undergone a quiet transformation. Flower beds bloomed in vibrant colors. Children played freely in the streets and friendly greetings echoed through the air. The HOA board introduced a Neighbor of the Month award to recognize individuals who contributed positively to the community. Unsurprisingly, Jack was one of the first recipients. When they announced his name during a meeting, he stood up reluctantly, scratching the back of his neck as applause filled the room. "I don't need awards," he said humbly. "I'm just glad we're all getting along better." His words resonated deeply with many attendees. They symbolized a collective desire to leave behind old grievances and embrace a brighter future. Even Karen, who occasionally peeked in on meetings from afar, seemed to soften over time. While she never fully regained her former influence, some neighbors noted that her interactions became less confrontational. Perhaps the experience had taught her humility, or maybe she simply preferred staying out of the spotlight. For Jack, the ordeal ultimately served as a reminder of life's unpredictability. What began as a routine plumbing job turned into a months-long saga involving law enforcement, public scrutiny, and neighborhood politics. Yet through it all, he emerged stronger and more grounded. He learned that standing up for oneself doesn't mean alienating others. Instead, it can inspire respect and unity. He also discovered the importance of resilience, the ability to weather storms and come out the other side unscathed. One sunny afternoon, as Jack sat on his porch watching calves frolic in the pasture, he reflected on everything that had happened. The memory of Karen storming onto his property and calling 911 still struck him as absurd, almost comical, but it also reminded him of how far he, and the community, had come since then. The ranch looked the same as it always had, sprawling fields, towering trees, and the comforting hum of nature surrounding him. Yet somehow it felt different, more peaceful, more connected. In the distance, a group of kids chased each other across the road, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Nearby, a neighbor waved as she walked her dog, pausing briefly to chat about the upcoming farmer's market. These moments, though ordinary, filled Jack with gratitude. Life on the ranch wasn't just about solitude anymore. It was about belonging to something bigger, even if that something was as simple as a tight-knit group of neighbors who cared for one another. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jack leaned back in his chair and smiled. Despite the chaos of the past year, he wouldn't trade his life for anything. His ranch was more than just land. It was home, and thanks to the lessons he'd learned, he knew he could face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and grace. After all, storms pass, and when they do, the skies often shine brighter than ever before.